My name is Deb Goodkin, and I'm the Executive Director of the FreeBSD Foundation. And so today I'm going to talk about FreeBSD, the other Unix-like operating system. So some of you came a little bit later, and I did a little poll earlier to find out who has never heard of FreeBSD, who uses FreeBSD, who'd like to learn more about FreeBSD, and just to give me a sense of where people are coming from. So just to give you a little history of who I am, I joined the FreeBSD Foundation in 2015, so I've been working for them for 15 years, almost 15 years now, so it's a really long time. My background is, I do have a technical background. It's actually not operating systems, and so I include that so people understand why I'm giving more of a high-level talk on FreeBSD and go into the more technical details, because as I am working on understanding those better, that isn't my background. So actually I was a developer with storage devices, with disk drives for many years. And so I did firmware and assembly language and moved up to C programming eventually within the small devices. But what I try to do besides running the FreeBSD Foundation is spend time learning about FreeBSD myself and trying to use it, so then I could not only support the project, but I can advocate for them too as a user. And so one goal is to recruit more users and contributors to the project. So the goals for my talk today is pretty generic. It's really to share our history, we did get it working, so I don't know if you want me to restart or not. Okay. And what is FreeBSD, and talk about why people use it, and then why you should use it and contribute back to the project. And then if we do have time, I'll take questions. We also have a table over in the expo area, and so if we don't have time or you just want to talk more one-on-one, I will be at the table after the talk. And so please come over there, get stickers. We don't have a lot of swag left, but we have a lot of cool stickers, and so please stop by there. So what is FreeBSD? So I'm not going to make you answer this. So first I want to start with, it's not a Linux distribution. And I don't do this to be mean to Tux. I think Tux is really cute, but it's really just to make a point. And one reason is, so the survey came out, this was probably, I think this was in early January, and this is from opensource.com, so they're a big organization. And I don't know if you noticed, I mean, I did highlight the point I'm trying to make here, is they're asking what is your favorite Linux distribution, and they include FreeBSD. It might be more, it might stand out more if they put Windows or Mac OS in this list. And so I included this here just to highlight that even though it's 2020, people still get confused that FreeBSD is a Linux distribution, and it's not. It's a totally separate operating system. So to talk a little bit about the FreeBSD world, I look at it as three different components that make up this world. And so on the top right, that's the operating system. So when you load it on your computer, when you're running it on your computer, that's the boot up screen, and that's the actual operating system that's running on your device. The center is the community, and actually there's quite a few community members here at the conference, which is really awesome. And so that's the community is built up of people from users, people who maybe even their partners are, work or use FreeBSD, and so they have an interest, to people who actually develop and contribute to the operating system and to the project. And then on the bottom is, and that photo is of some of the board members and some of my team members of the foundation. And I'll go over it a little bit later, that the FreeBSD Foundation, which is what I run, We're a 501c3, and so we're for the public good, and our whole purpose is to support the project and the community. So what is FreeBSD? It is one of the oldest, largest, and most successful open source projects around. And so we're actually used as a model for other open source projects. It's a complete operating system. So this is one thing that really distinguishes us from Linux, is that, so when you hear about Linux, when you talk about Linux, people think of it as an operating system, but it's one component of an operating system. So it's the kernel. And FreeBSD is the whole operating system. So it is made up of the kernel, the userland, the tools, documentation, everything that you need to run your operating system. So for example, if you're like a Windows user and you get your Windows 10, that is a whole complete operating system, has everything that you want, and that's what FreeBSD is. We support over 33,000 third-party software packages, which means, so you're running your operating system and you want software to surf the internet, to do documentation, to get your email. And so those are all those software packages that you want to use on your operating system and to do your work. The community is made up of highly technical people, from our committers who actually commit source code and documentation, to people who use it. So more like people, I would be considered a contributor because I actually can't commit yet. I'm working on getting my commit vet, but I haven't gotten it yet. We work on many different platforms, and including many different cloud providers. And there really are tens of millions of deployed systems out there running FreeBSD. So to give you a little idea of where FreeBSD comes from, this is my really simplified family tree of FreeBSD. And so you may have heard last year Unix celebrated its 50th anniversary. And so that started out in New Jersey at Bell Labs. And then when they were developing it, Berkeley and a few other universities actually had their own version of Unix too, and AT&T actually depended on them doing research on it and adding to it. And so Berkeley actually took it, and I think it was probably like 1974, and they started doing their own implementation of features, and they actually implemented like the TCP/IP stack, which a lot of different operating systems use. And then at the end of the 80s, early 90s, BSD, it wasn't supported. They didn't quite have the funding. So BSD stands for Berkeley Software Distribution, and so they didn't quite have the funding anymore, and so people wanted to continue supporting it, and so they branched out into FreeBSD and NetBSD. And since then, there are other flavors too of BSD, like you've probably heard of, or you may have heard of OpenBSD, and that actually branched out from NetBSD. So this is sort of this fun timeline that we put together, and it talks about the history, or it shows some of the key events that happened from Unix starting in '69, and the C programming language was developed there at Bell Labs in '72, and that didn't really have much to do with FreeBSD, but it did allow for portability on different platforms at that time. And so I'm not going to go through the different BSDs, but each one that's here, it sort of represents a significant implementation or something that was added to BSD at that time that was significant. But really, what I like to get to, this is sort of for our own fun that we created this scrolling timeline, but it was here on the sort of the mid right on 1992, and I don't know if you can read the words in the back. We do have the timeline on our website too. It's actually a horizontal one, and but 386 BSD was the first unencumbered version of BSD. And what I mean by that is that since it came from AT&T, it was licensed, and so you couldn't provide it to users without them having to buy the license. And so at that point was when they had rewritten everything, almost everything, and it was the first unencumbered version. And then if you see next on the 1992, the BSDI lawsuit, there was a lawsuit that was brought up to a company called BSDI. They were the first ones that were trying to sell the BSD, and they got in trouble because they had this phone number called 1-800-IT'S-UNIX, and so it was a big red flag to the people who own the license for Unix, and the reason why I highlight this is that it really held the development back at that time because those developers were focusing on the lawsuit versus developing and innovating on BSD, and so it did hold them back for about a year and a half. And it was really, and what happened was that it was just a few files that they said that were still like AT&T type of files, and those actually got rewritten. And so FreeBSD then formally formed in 1993. We actually celebrate its birthday June 19th, and we have a FreeBSD Day, and so we have fun and celebrate it every year. It'll be 27 years old this year. And then the first version of FreeBSD, which was 1.0, came out closer to the end of 1993. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. So this is the chart. That's going to be really hard to read from the back, but it's okay. What I'm really trying to show you is the lineage of FreeBSD, and I sort of explain it, and I also have a close-up view of this too. But the reason why I show this to you is because I like to show just like how prevalent Unix was, and how FreeBSD's family lineage really comes from the original Unix. And so the yellow oval on the top is Unix, and so that came out in '69. So all the pink operating systems, and basically what they are, you have AIX, and so you have IBM's version of Unix, you have HP, you have Sun. So all these corporations had their own versions of Unix. When I graduated college, I started out with IBM, and so we were actually using AIX. And I heard that it's still actually around, that people still use it. I was actually surprised. And then the yellow is sort of a combination of open source and proprietary, and then all the green is all open source. And so if you go zoom up a little bit closer, what I'm showing here is when you look at the yellow blocks that are vertical, those are all the different flavors of BSD, the main releases that they came out with. And then if you go to the left, and I have it circled, is when FreeBSD branched out. And so right above that, you have the 386 BSD. And then over to the left, a couple of columns, that's when Linux came out. So what I'm showing here is that FreeBSD really has this long history of innovation and architecture of the operating system. And Linux started around the same time in the early 90s, and it's referred to as Unix-Like too. But it was really developed to replace Minix, which was a learning operating system at that time. And so that was the purpose of why that came out. So most people really haven't heard of FreeBSD, or if they have, they really don't know what it is. And like I was saying earlier, if people have heard of it, I would say there's a high percentage of people who believe that FreeBSD is a Linux, just another Linux distribution. And here I'm highlighting marquee companies, like logos that you would recognize, who use FreeBSD and either run it in their data centers or base their products on FreeBSD. And so this isn't, this is just a few of the companies that use it. And really, most likely, you're using FreeBSD. So I would say 99% of the people in here watch Netflix. I may be wrong, but in my survey from sitting at our table, we've asked everyone who stopped by our table and uses or watches Netflix. So Netflix and Apple are probably the most companies that use FreeBSD. And so when you are watching a movie, when you push that button to hit play on the movie or TV show that you want to watch, that's all on FreeBSD servers. And they're transferring over 90 gigabits per second on a single CDN or server. And traffic for Netflix is like on the prime time, they're running like 33% of the internet. So like at night in Pacific time zone, it's 6 to 9, it's over 33% of the traffic on the internet. So what that means really is FreeBSD is running that much on the internet. Apple, the Mac OS, the iOS, OS X are all based on FreeBSD. It's a lot of the components within those operating systems were based on FreeBSD. The command line that you may use if you're using a Mac is all FreeBSD based. The PlayStation, the 4 and the 5, I don't think the 5 has come out yet, but they're all based on FreeBSD. And Groupon and Trivago are good examples of all their data centers are running FreeBSD. So I include this list because these are companies that a lot of people are using their products. So why use FreeBSD? I mean, and I'm asked this a lot, and I'll cover some of the stuff a little bit later too, because I'll get a couple questions, especially at conferences like this, like why do people use it, and then, well, why should I try it on my desktop? And those are really good questions. Because a lot of times those people who are asking are running like a Linux distribution already. And so if they're happy with it, why would they change or why would they try? So I'm going to try to cover that today. So my first reason why I think people should use FreeBSD is because of the community. And we are a small community, though I did say that there's thousands of contributors around the world. But we are really approachable, and when I say that, I mean that I like to think of us as we're nice and friendly. But if you're trying FreeBSD and say you're a new person and you have a question, and it might be the most basic question, and someone might just a typical response might be like, "Didn't you read the handbook?" And but people don't respond like that. They may say, oh, this is explained in the handbook in the section, and so they're really helpful. And that's what I find most of the time with the community. So you can get help, fairly easy online. We're known for excellent documentation. So besides approaching the community that say you are trying something, I need to copy a file from my USB drive, and I have no idea how to do that. Google it, and you find it either in the handbook or you find documentation on that. And I just went through that when I was setting up my FreeBSD system. Great tooling and modern compilers. We actually just fully moved over to Clang, which is if you're familiar with compilers, there's typically the GCC and then Clang. And GCC is under a GPL license, and I'll talk about license shortly. And Clang is under a permissive license, and so it allows people to use it without restrictions. And we find this a lot in universities doing research to have a unencumbered or non-GPL license. It really helps them with their research and with the tools and the operating system that they're working on. Because it has such a long history and things have slowly changed and improved over the years, is very consistent development model that they follow, as well as the release processes. And like I said earlier, a lot of architectures are supported. And then the license, if you're not familiar with GPL versus the BSD license, there's actually other ones too. But you'll hear, for GPL, you'll hear copyleft, and there may be some other terms too. But basically what it means is that, so if you're under a GPL license and you make a change and maybe it's a proprietary thing for your product and you distribute it, then you're required to make that available. And so companies who want to keep their IP, then they do like to use the BSD or a more permissive license so they can keep their IP. And so, so it does mean, like, if you change my code, you're not required to give it back to me or even to let me know. So now we'll talk a little bit about how the project works. And that is a photo of us from our BSD Canadian conference that we have every year. So the project is separate from the foundation. So a lot of times projects will actually be under foundation. So a really good example would be the Linux Foundation, which is, I think of it as like an umbrella organization. It has a lot of different projects underneath it. But we're actually, the project is separate from the foundation, and what it also means is that the foundation has no control over the project. We help them, but we can't tell them what to do and what direction they need to take. It has the structure is, it has a core team, which I view as sort of like upper managers or like a board of directors. And so they step in to help with like developer relations. They may help with direction, but they can't tell the project what to do. So for example, they're working on a couple of things this year. One is moving to Git, and but they do have to have a buy-in from the project too to completely move over. So you don't have one person who makes the decisions for the project. So it's nice, it makes it more diverse. But also if you want to change like that, move to Git, you can't just say, okay, we're going to do it. You've got to explain to the community why it's important, and you have to get buy-in from the community. We have a mentorship model, and so say if you are interested in contributing to FreeBSD, then if you start submitting patches and someone recognizes the work that you're doing, then they'll step in or they'll reach out to you and offer to become your mentor, which is really nice because then you've been doing it on your own, and now you have someone who can help guide you and direct you to like documentation for standards and you know, just sort of like how we do things, and provide guidance as well as review your changes too. And then once they feel like you're ready, then they'll say, okay, you're on your own, because I mean that's what everyone wants, so they don't have to spend time reviewing other people's changes. And it really is a collaborative development environment, so people do work together. This is my visual. I'm really trying to improve this, and but I'm trying to figure out a way to just visualize how the project is organized. And so I show on the top, you have the foundation and the project, and I'm showing here how they're totally separate. And the foundation has no like dotted line to the project, but we do have people on our staff that work in or are involved in some of these teams. And so under the project, you have that core team like I was talking about. It's 9 members, and they are elected, and they then oversee these other functional teams. And the nice thing about having these different teams is that, I mean, first you have like, you know, the security people, you know who they are, and that their focus is security. But you can get involved in areas that you're also interested in. So say if you are interested in security or maybe ports management, then you can get involved with one of these teams. And then because there's only so much space on a slide, I listed a lot of the other teams down at the bottom. And so the ones in the red aren't any more important. So this talks a little bit about the core team and how it works and really what their responsibilities are. And we are coming up to elections this year, so everyone on the core team has been on the core team for 2 years now, or almost 2 years now. And we do have overlapping people, so some people will stay on. Well, I mean, they have to be elected. So they'll run again, and if they're elected, then we have that overlap, which really helps. And at the bottom, this is a big thing with FreeBSD, that we do not have a benevolent dictator for life. So we don't have one person who's overseeing the whole project, who's making all the decisions. And one fear when you have a project that's so old, and it's the same thing with Linux too, since we're around the same age, is that we do actually have a lot of the original developers, which is sort of cool. And those developers were at Berkeley. So it's really cool because they bring all that experience and knowledge. And when we bring in younger people or newer people, then they can share that. And the one thing that I've seen is that, and it's really only a handful of people who are still on the project, but they're really interested in helping the new people. And so they're viewed as these rock stars, and they're looked up to, right? And that they're so approachable and so willing to help new people. And I love listening to the stories of back in the day, but also hearing their advice. And they're also not stuck in, this is how it works and we're not going to change. That they recognize that things are changing. And one thing we've run into in the project is that we're still on SVN, the source control system. And SVN is dated, it's old. And kids who are coming out of college are using Git and GitHub, and that's what they know. And we want these young people to want to be part of our project. And if this is the tool that they're used to, then we should be there too. And so that's why I was saying the core team is really working on moving us over there. And so it's really cool when you see one of the oldest people on the project who recognizes that and is really interested in supporting that, instead of going, why? Because in any project you're going to get that. I mean, I do that too. It's like, it works, why change? So the way the releases work, so I did talk about not changing, but we also follow, this is sort of the opposite, this POLA term. And what it means is principle of least astonishment. And so it's like, don't change things that work. But the idea is don't break things that work. So don't make a change just to make a change. Make a change to improve things. And so think through it before you just add something. And so that's really just this philosophy. And so because of it, things tend not to break. They do, but not. It doesn't happen a lot. We have two different types of releases. We have major release and the point release. And major release would be so right now we have 12.1. When we roll to 12.0, or we will be next year for 13.0, that's considered a major release. That only happens every 2 years, sometimes 2.5 years. And then we come out with the point releases much more often. And so right now they're getting ready to release, or they're working on the schedule for 12.2. And so why would that have gone out? No? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Really having trouble here. So that thing's on. It's not changing. Let's see. Well, really, my apologies for this. I've actually never had a problem like this before. I don't know if someone wants to power cycle that, if that would check the input terminal. So it thinks there's no input. See, obviously it's not running FreeBSD. So that's in there. I guess you could do that now. Yeah, no, thank you, I appreciate it. So I don't think you were in here earlier when we couldn't get this to work. And then I found this magic button up here. So that's that. This may, let's see here. Say that again? It doesn't. I wonder if I can't tell when people are walking in here. So it just turned off. No. But it was working until just a couple minutes ago. Okay, so now it was doing that before, and then I pushed this button and it switched. Okay. That's right, yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's, okay. I'll try to speed up a little bit to make sure we get through everything. But this is really just talking about how we do releases. And then we do have two types of branches. And so, for example, when we taught our workshop on Friday, we used what's referred to as stable branch or our release branch. And like it says, it's stable and reliable. So that's something you would typically want to use. For my FreeBSD system, since I needed the latest Wi-Fi drivers, then I'm running current. And actually, Netflix is a good example of a company that does everything with the current branch. So they stay up to date with all the changes. So it's a choice. And then to contribute, there's many ways to contribute to the project. So a lot of people refer to, contributing source code, but not everyone's a developer, but they want to get involved. So, for example, since I don't write kernel code, I do documentation. That's my way to contribute to the project. And it's a great way to learn about open source and FreeBSD and be involved and maintaining ports. And the ports are those software packages I talked about. And it's easy to get started, and so just some of the suggestions that I have for if you were interested to translate the documentation, to pick a port to maintain. We always need port maintainers. Or just going through the PR list and submitting a bug fix. And a bug fix could be code, or it could actually be documentation. It could be there's missing a period or a comma in the sentence. So real simple things just to get started. And so, why do companies use FreeBSD? And I know I do have a long list, but really it's, when I talk to companies, they know the history of FreeBSD, and that's really important to them. And so they know that they're familiar with development life, the architecture, how it's well thought out, the documentation. A lot of companies use FreeBSD because of license. And so, and there's countries that want to do their own development, and so BSD license is really important. ZFS is something right now that it's a class 1 citizen with FreeBSD. It's integrated in the kernel. So a lot of companies and users really want ZFS for data integrity. And then the open community. So the collaborative model and welcoming community is really important. And then all these different applications where FreeBSD does stand out. I mean, really, when you narrow this down, the network services uses a lot of FreeBSD, and embedded systems, and the storage for data centers. So I do include some of the features. I'm not going to go into kernel features. It really just highlights that just like all operating systems, it supports what's necessary, and but also the fact that we do have the extensive documentation as well as that cohesive system where when we're building, when we're testing, that it's one cohesive operating system. We're not pulling from different projects. userland features. So this is another area that's also integrated into that operating system. And so there's a focus on consistency. And this is actually one of the areas that the Mac OS took from FreeBSD. And then going over some of the other features that stand out on FreeBSD, we have the ZFS has been, that was originally developed at Sun, and there's a lot of work going on that within the FreeBSD community. And so, like I said, it's really viewed as a Class 1 citizen. dtrace is a real-time debugging or performance analysis tool. Jails was the first containerization out there. So people are familiar with Docker. And so Jails, a lot of people actually use the Jails capability on FreeBSD. Beehive is our own hypervisor, and it's currently being improved, and it runs all the major operating systems. And the cool thing is I was actually with one of the co-founders of Beehive, and he would never admit that he was one of them. It's really hard to find the history from him, because to him he views it as there was a whole team of people working on it, but I think it was just two of them. And but anyway, he's getting involved with this again, and so he's stepping in to add some improvements to Beehive. And then, like I said, I mean, TCP/IP has been a reference. It's used as a reference. Technology or implementation, as well as it is used in operating systems. And then Capsicum is an interesting thing. It's a sandboxing type of feature that it's a security feature, and it's being worked on from the University of Cambridge. And the interesting thing about that is the fact that there's been a lot of funding recently, and a big announcement from University of Cambridge and ARM working in partnership with a security RISC-V implementation within the ARM processor. And so they're getting close to, $100 million in funding. And the best part about it is that, and that is called, so the FreeBSD side, the hardware is called Cherry, and it works with Capsicum, which is the software side of it. But it's been working with FreeBSD for 5 years now, so we sort of have a leg up on that, but that's going to be really exciting for security. To cover a little bit about what we do, so we, the FreeBSD Foundation, so we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. We are based in Boulder, Colorado, and so that's where I come from, but we are a distributed team, so I have people all over the world, and we have people on staff who do software development, like I said, we do advocacy, and then we also have a volunteer board of directors. We're 100% funded by donations, so we're not a membership organization, and so individuals and companies do fund our work. And if you are using FreeBSD and your company's using it, we always appreciate a shout out to help get more funding from the companies that are using FreeBSD. And our whole purpose really is to support the critical needs of the project. So there's holes in the project, meaning that there's areas that maybe we don't have a volunteer, or they have a day job and they really can't focus on that area, and so we can actually step in and help fill that. So we did that with release engineering for, I think it was over 5 years. And what we try to do is get that, improve on it, and then so someone in the project could take it over. So we're not always funding that work. So I have this slide because I give this talk at a lot of Linux conferences, and the purpose is not to convert people to FreeBSD, though I would like to, but it's really I think it's just really important to understand the differences. And because I think it only helps you in your job, or even if you're using, say you're using Linux as a hobbyist, even trying FreeBSD out, you might see things that, oh, I really like that, and maybe I can incorporate that, or maybe I don't like this and I would never do this. And so, but it's a learning opportunity really to improve not only your knowledge, but they're basically products, and even though they're free. But they are products, and it's a whole open source ecosystem, and so it's really helping that. And being a little competitive too makes those products better. So it really helps you in your job, and we can learn from each other. And we have found in some of the hardware issues that have come out in the last couple of years that we actually have worked together on workarounds, because we're all trying to solve the same problem that isn't our problem. And so like Spectrum Meltdown is a great example that came out a couple of years ago. It was a security issue in the Intel hardware, and so we all had to implement workarounds. And so we worked together by sharing those workarounds and having others review those. And so it really was a showcase of us working together. And when I say us, it was really FreeBSD with other Linux projects. So that was good. And then also just learning different philosophies, different coding methodologies, and understanding that and why you might want to do it one way or do it another, and maybe you make a choice of what you prefer. And the smaller code base of FreeBSD actually makes a really good platform for learning. And so when you look at the two kernels, FreeBSD is about 5.5 million lines of code, which is a lot. But when you look at the Linux kernel, it's over 35 million lines of code, and it's a lot. And so say you're interested in systems programming, or you want to learn about operating systems, having that smaller code base is easier. There's less code to look at, and so it is a great way to learn about operating systems and learning about system programming. And then I include that last quote because I actually read this from someone. So well, actually, I don't know if it's he, but that person felt like by learning FreeBSD, they became a better Linux admin and systems engineer. And so that really resonated with me because that's what I'm trying to get across. So I know I have this big long list of why you should contribute to FreeBSD, but really, I'll run through this really quick, that just being part of a welcoming community, like I just said, it's a great way to learn systems programming or just operating systems. And because it's the smaller projects, and not just the code size, but the number of people who contribute and who are involved, it's easier to step in and make a more notable contribution. And so, we don't have thousands of people in this hierarchy of lieutenants, that you could actually get your changes in the source tree. And it doesn't mean that we'll accept like low quality stuff, but you also have people who are reviewing and helping lift these people up. And then yes, a lot of the founders, a few of the founders are still part of the community, and they are really approachable. And so it's a great way to hear the history and to learn about FreeBSD. And so this was just sort of the summary, because I do get asked a lot, like, well, why should I try it as a desktop? And because FreeBSD doesn't really have like a distribution for a desktop. Like you install Windows on your machine, and it's this nice GUI, and they make it really easy to set up. And I know that there are some Linux distributions that are like that. And FreeBSD does have a few that I would encourage you to try, like Fury, BSD Midnight, BSD, Ghost BSD. I haven't had a chance to try them yet, but I'm really interested in seeing how they work, and does it really make it easier, and would I use that for setting up a desktop? But these are sort of, when people ask me, to me the first thing that always stands out is community. So when you leave here, and if you're interested, I would say, try it out for yourself. We did this as a workshop on Friday, like I was saying, and we did it on VirtualBox. And so, but there's a lot of different cloud providers out there that support FreeBSD. And so even like DigitalOcean, it costs like $5 a month, maybe, and it's pretty low cost. And so you could get FreeBSD there. And then, actually, this is from our workshop on Friday. And so I included it because there were a lot of people who came to our table who missed the workshop. And so all the notes for what we did, from setting up VirtualBox to how to install FreeBSD, all the notes are in GitHub, and so you could go to bsd.pw, and then at the top it looks like that. It says scale 18x, and I would suggest, and if you can't read it, just ask me after, and we can write that down. And all the notes for every step, every command that we issued is there, and so you could do it. Or next year you go attend our workshop, because we'll do it again, and we learn every time. We did it last year too, and we're really working on improving the workshops. So next year will be even better. And this is probably also hard to read, but this is my high-level list of resources to get you started. The book on the top left is more if you're interested in the internals of the kernel, and so you're like a kernel, you want to be a kernel developer. The one in the middle is the one that I use, the absolute FreeBSD. That's more for like practitioners, someone who is running FreeBSD on their computer. And then that's our magazine on the right, and the magazine comes out every 2 months, and it's free. And then we have mailing lists, and we have a Facebook group. See, here, this back up. I know what happens is the slides, and well, let me see if I can just do this. I haven't figured out how to get it so it doesn't stop, or I mean disappear. So we have, so the FreeBSDFoundation.org has how-to guides. Actually, the best way to learn about FreeBSD is to read the handbook. And it's really well written and interesting, so it's not like this is boring manual. And I would suggest just Google FreeBSD handbook, and you'll find it that way. We do have forums, mailing lists, and IRC are ways to communicate with people. And then there is a Facebook FreeBSD user group that I see that also has, I'll just do this. It's a great way to ask questions, and every time I've seen a response, it's always been really helpful. So I would suggest posting questions there too. So that was all I had, and I guess because of the technical difficulties we had, it did take the hour. But does anyone have any questions? And we will be at our table too. Yes? Yeah, so the question was, are any of the original UC Berkeley people still involved with the project? And so Kirk McKusick was one, he developed the fast file system, and he was one of the original people on he was an undergrad when they were developing it, and so he's actually on my board, and he actually still contributes to the project. And if you meet him, so does anyone in here not know the name Bill Joy? And so Bill Joy was a co-founder of Sun, and so he was at Berkeley, and he was one of the main BSD people. He was a project lead on the Berkeley Unix, and he actually had this idea, this company, that he wanted to start. He had finished his PhD and stuff. And so Kirk I think he was getting a business degree too, and so he presented his proposal to Kirk to get advice, and also to offer Kirk, do you want to come with me to start up this company? And Kirk's like, he was really close to finishing his PhD, and he was like, I can't, because I need to finish this. And he didn't think it was a very good business model too, so he didn't do it. And so so he said, so basically, he said, never take business advice from me, because he just totally blew it by not taking that opportunity at Sun. And but you don't know. And so and then Mike Corrales is another one. His name isn't as famous, but I interviewed him last year for fun, and he's still on the project. And so it's really neat. It's neat talking to these people. Like I said, they're just really friendly and approachable, and it's different than, I know in the Linux world, because I do go to Linux conferences, that Linus is this rock star that, I get it, but he's not approachable, and so it's different. Yeah, the projects are definitely different, and I'm not trying to say one's better than the other. I'm part of one, and I do like it a lot, and my day job is to support it. But also, I do hang out with people, and when I don't have to, and, which I think says a lot. And I think it's a really cool community, and it is diverse, and it's diverse culturally. It's not as diverse gender-wise, and me with my engineering background, that is something that I've been working on, and trying to bring more women into it.